Hi, welcome to the bathtub. This is the old masturbator and the old masturbator's parakeet, and we're gonna talk about a bathtub, All-Bathtub Hall of Fame, and the recipient of this prestigious award of the All-Bathtub Hall of Fame might cause a little bit of consternation out there, and it causes a little consternation in me. Is Agatha Christie? I think we probably have lots of arguments about Agatha Christie over there. In life with people about who likes them and who don't. But I think basically I kind of like Agatha Christie. And we have to say this, that I don't think any writer, Dodo's been a huge pain in the butt today, no writer has a higher gallon of bathtub water per book ratio than any other. I'm sure she must have used up more water in bathtubs in her life than any other writer. I'm taking a wild guess at that. Anyway, we're talking. It's connected to a piece I've written in the New Republic, which I will link to below, about a new biography. It just came out by Lucy Worsley of Agatha Christie. It's quite a good book, An Elusive Woman. And in the course of working on the piece, I also read a book that just 15 years ago, which is Laura Thompson's Agatha Christie, A Mysterious Life, which I kind of liked a little bit better. What I liked about the Laura Thompson book is she really she's not just a fan of Christie, she thinks Christie's a really good writer, and she does a pretty good reading of even some of the more obscure and more annoying of the Agatha Christie books. And there's a lot of annoying Christie novels out there. So I thought I liked that a little bit better for that. But they both tell the story of a woman who had like a lot of middle-class British writers who went off to write kind of popular fiction. Whether it was children's fiction or fantasy fiction. She came from a middle class family, she was very secluded and very happy as a child. She had this huge estate. She had servants taking care of her, and her parents loved her, and she pretty much could do anything she wanted all day. And then her father died when she was fairly young. They started to lose money. The servants all had to go away to get decent, better paying jobs, and the mother went a little crazy. And from that point on, Christie was took a long time trying to find that kind of same sense of sanctuary and happiness and her own place. Her first husband, Archie, was a man she loved and was very passionately in love with, and he broke up with her after about 10 years into the marriage. It was between the wars, and ran off with a younger woman, and really just devastated Christie. And Christie was famous for, at that time, when she found out about her husband cheating on her, leaving her, she ran off and disappeared for 11 days. And people thought she'd been murdered, or they thought she was staging her own murder. And there's still books, large parts of both these biographies, just focus on this kind of 11-day period when clearly she was freaking out. Her husband was leaving her, and she just didn't know what she was doing. And she ran off and dumped her car in a swamp somewhere. And the whole country went crazy looking for her. And it became the mystery of her life that people like to solve. But that was kind of the most exciting thing that happened to her. She wasn't a very, she liked to travel. She was married to a couple. She was married to a man. Her second husband was a archaeologist, and she had lots of friends who were archaeologists, and she liked going to digs, and she actually sponsored lots of in Iraq and the Mideast, lots of archaeological digs and so forth. But for the most part, and she writes about them in some of her mystery novels, but for the most part, she was a secluded woman who liked to live at home and buy lots of houses and enjoy. She liked to shop, I think she did. Cheers, post-text, all natural. I think we wore Dodo out. It's been jumping up and down. So I just want to say a few things about her, and just kind of browse through some of her books. I mean, I think most of us have read Christie. It's very hard. Anyone who's a big bathtub reader has read Christie, whether they're their childhood or they continue reading her. I read her off and on when I was a kid. I read a few of her books. My mother used to like Agatha Christie, and I liked what I read of Agatha Christie's when I was a kid. I found them a little confusing. But if you think about the board game Clue, most of her books are like that. There's take place in some secluded place, like some holiday home or on a cruise ship, or a train, and all the people are a little shady, and they're cheating on their husbands, or they've stolen money from a bank, or they're all a little shady, And then one of them gets murdered, and then we find out who the murderer is. And some detective, usually Hercule Poirot, who's in most of her books, or Miss Marple, who's the old nosy woman from down the lane in several of her, probably her better books. Those are much better than the Poirots. She goes in and starts investigating, and then they find the murderer. And usually there's lots of flips and flops and so forth. And some ridiculous, sometimes the solutions are quite outrageous. Usually there's some outrageousness about the way the murderer has plotted these things. And Christie was famous for coming up with kind of clever shifts on the general rules that were inherited from people like Sherlock Holmes and G.K. Chesterton and so forth. So, and from Poe. She has, for example, she has one where the narrator, who's like a Dr. Watson type, who's telling you the story, he actually cuts out parts of the story because he's the murderer. I won't tell you which one it is, but you must know which one that is. Everybody has seen or read The Murder on the Orient Express, where it turns out all the suspects are the murderers and so forth. And then there were none. I won't tell you the surprise ending, but there's 10 people on an island, and they get murdered one by one. There's one of the things I talk about in the essay below is that there's a lot of human slaughter. The people getting slaughtered all over the place in these books, and yet they're the most comforting books you can possibly read. You know, the advertising gimmick for Christie's novels over her life was a Christie for Christmas. And the British love murders. If you watch TV in England, you can't avoid murder mysteries. People getting slaughtered by their families and friends for money. And it's usually about money that they're being killed for. But they're still comforting because there's no on-screen violence. They're not like Scott Turow or Andrew Vax or all these things where there's all these horrific violence is being described. It's always off-screen, off-stage. You don't really see much more except maybe a little track of blood on the rhododendrons outside of the house. So they're very comforting places, and they're places where they're like little communities in middle class England, and the middle class people are always the murderers. You don't have you have some racism, and you have some in Christie, but the murderers are always white middle class people. I don't think they're ever the servants. I'm pretty sure they're never the servants. Anyway, her first book was called, I think, The Adventure at Styles. I think that was the first one when she invented Hercule Poirot. I find Poirot a really boring character. He really annoys me. He's got that fake accent, and it kind of comes and goes, and he keeps talking about the little brown cells, the gray cells, and he's really kind of an annoying character to me. So those are my least favorite. But I have a lot of her books on Kindle, so I can't show you. One of my favorites I did like a couple of the Poirots, so if you want to check them out, I quite liked the Peril at End House. Peril at End House is kind of a fun one, and if you find that one, that's worth checking out. Laura Thompson talked up this book, which is a book of stories featuring Hercule Poirot. It's called The Labors of Hercules. I talked about this a few weeks ago on the Story Go Around, and this is quite a cool little collection. It's very classic Christie, really manipulative little stories with a little plot twist in the middle of them, and they always kind of worked. And they're all about 20 pages, and basically Hercule wants to do metaphoric labors of Hercules. So he makes connections between the famous labors of the real Hercules and his own adventures. It's a good little book of stories. I'd really check that out. The other one I really was surprised to like, and it's kind of the classic Christie. One of the things about Christie is that they kind of keep you guessing. At the same time, it's total bullshit and you're totally manipulated. And by the time you get to the end, you just don't care anymore. Often, I just don't care who killed who. I feel that way about most mystery novels. But this was called Curtain. And this was written by Christie. Christie wrote the last novel of Poirot and the last novel of Miss Marple in the 40s and stuck them in a safe deposit box so that she could publish them late in her life. And I really enjoyed Curtain. She really pulls out a couple of clever ideas. She gets you into the book in a much different place than you normally are. The murderer is interesting. It's a very interesting switch that goes on in the whole thing, and it's Poirot's last case. And if you don't like Poirot, he dies in it. He actually dies in the book, so you can say finally, that guy, he's dead. I don't have to hear about these stupid gray cells anymore. So anyway, that was one I really liked, and I liked that one as well. I haven't read Sleeping Murder, but I will say I really enjoyed, of the books I read, I really enjoyed the first couple of Miss Marples. I think the Moving Finger is the first one. I forget. No. It's Murder in the Vicarage. Where was that one? Anyway, I have it somewhere. I have a bunch more. I can't find where they are. There's one called Murder in the Vicarage, and the Moving Finger. Miss Marple's basically a nosy old bat. She's really cynical. She doesn't like human beings very much, and she's really just constantly looking at all her neighbors and spying on them. I've never watched any of the movies. I've never watched any of the Hercule Poirot TV shows. I've watched Agatha Christie adaptations, but never watched these. But she's a really interesting kind of character. She's kind of she's not in the center of the book like Poirot. She's often just kind of orbiting around the edges of the book. She's if people talk about her and she's going off and she's always walking up the lanes looking in people's windows with her spy glasses. But anyway, these were quite fun, and it's a very dark vision of English middle class life. It's catching the murderer is not going to solve these people's problems. There's a lot of kind of subterfuge going on in this world. So there you go. There's a bunch of books. What else there are other ones I liked. Murder at the Vicarage. I don't have that one here. The one about the one that was adapted, the ABC Murders, is kind of fun. That's been adapted for Netflix. It's on Netflix, and BBC may have done it. In the UK, it was either Thames Television or BBC, have been doing kind of dark, modern versions of Christie. They did The Pale Horse. They did their version of And Then There Were None. And they're much darker and grimmer than Christie, which are fairly light and winsome novels of death. But I've enjoyed, Lucy and I've enjoyed those too. They're a little bit of a twist, and I think some Christie aficionados have not liked them. But she still works in the bathtub. She still stands up in the bathtub. I haven't read this, but she thought that Christie considers this her worst book, The Mystery of the Blue Train. So in respect, I did not read that one. And that's it. I would definitely suggest, if you must have read her. You must have read her, and you might just for Christmas have a Christie for Christmas. This biography is worth reading, and I like the Laura Thompson book, which is quite cheap. It's quite cheap on I got it on Netflix. I got it on Amazon for like $3, I think. I don't know if I have the cover still. Anyway, I had the cover. Anyway, there you go. Happy bathing. We're going to give Agatha Christie the notoriously happy. It'll make her very happy, and all her heirs. This symbolic trophy for your contributions to bathing pleasure is a blue plastic bathtub, which you can just look at, so you can just see it. And there you go. There you go, Agatha. Take care. Happy bathing. You too, Dodo.